paradigm.
And here I show you a deontic process pattern. The thing I derive control is based on deontic process pattern. It's different from other methods derived from accounting principle. Here I look at on possible deontic relationship in a contractual context. The first kind of relationship is a condition and a promise. This is a typical insurance contract. In an insurance contract, when you pay the insurer some amount, and then you have a promise to pay you something when certain conditions happen. The second thing is a bilateral contract. This is a typical sales contract between the two buyer and seller. You promise to buy something, and I promise to sell you something on certain future date. The second kind of relationship, so this one is relationship between different legal relations in a transaction. Another type of relationship is between two persons in a legal relation. For instance, you have the right to possess the good, then who has the duty to deliver the good to you? Usually in international trade, the person who holds the bill of lading is the person who has the right, and the carrier is the person who has the duty to deliver the good to any person who has the bill of lading document. So this kind of relationship is between two persons in a single relation. So look at the first two kinds of pattern. The first pattern is about relationship between two legal relations, and the second kind of relationship is between two persons in a single relation. Even though you see it looks simple, but it's really complicated. Let's say about the bilateral contract. There's not only one bilateral contract. There are many different kinds of bilateral contract. For instance, I have a promise to do something in exchange for another promise from you, but your promise needs to be done first in a sequential order. So if you don't finish your promise, I will have no duty to do my promise.
I'm just making sure. You're using the what pattern in a very loose way or in a very formal way?
Formal way. This is the loose way explained, and that I will show is the formal way.
Okay.
This is just a structure to show you the whole thing I will do, and then I will go to a specific pattern in a formal way. What I say here formally is easier to communicate with the audience. The second kind of pattern of bilateral contract, for instance, is a kind of a contingent contract. I and you have a mutual promise. If my computer broken, I can use your computer to check the email. And if your computer broken, you can use my computer to check the email. So you see, this is also a kind of mutual promise, but slightly different with the first one. So there are many, each of the pattern here, there are many sub-patterns. It's not only one pattern for each of them.
Managing the time. I want you to finish in 10 minutes.
Sure.
And in that 10 minutes, I want you to address, you told us, see if you're in agreement with this. You've told us that the main thing that you're going to deliver is a set of controlled goals.
Yes.
I want you to
trends.
focus on, so your deliverable is going to be what we're calling control requirements. We'll now call them control goals. To a certain open issues, the scope, what kind, how many different kinds, you just keep, this is suggesting that there's a big world out there, this is very complicated. What is going to be your scope of the deontic processes that you model? And what will be your completeness claims about the control goals that you identify? What can you say about the set of control goals that you identify?
Right.
That's what we're primarily concerned about, is essentially your success test.
Okay.
Are you okay with that? Is there, focusing?
These deliverables.
Okay. Okay. So focus on the first one. Focus on the first one. The modeling formalism. What thing that I can model? I can model the deontic state, including the basic deontic modality. That is about the obligation, the permission, forbidden, and waiver. The second thing, I can model the conditional deontic modality. If something happens, you have the duty to do something. The third one is the temporal deontic modality.
Now you're defining scope from the deontic logician's business.
Right.
But you've been telling us from the applied perspective. Are you going to model a certain kind of trade procedure?
Yes. I will apply to model trade procedure, including the documentary credit procedure. I will model a set of trade procedure, including the documentary credit procedure.
And all of its 18 variants.
Yes. Include the documentary credit and its variation.
Just as a suggestion, the International Chamber of Commerce, ICC, has a book that defines the documentary credit. This is a complicated procedure and it's evolved over hundreds of years. And they have a standard book about the scope of the documentary credit.
Yeah.
That could be your scope.
Yes. Right.
If you want. But
Yes.
we're looking for something like that. It says, you're going to tackle this class of procedures.
Right. Actually, I say here in the validation, I will model the documentary credit. I will model the documentary credit as you see in the first point. Some well-known procedure. And the most well-known procedure in international trade is the documentary credit. This procedure accounts for 60% of international trade.
So using the way bill, using the bill of lading, confirmed documentary credits,
right.
All of these.
Let me explain. The documentary credit have many variations. For instance, they have confirmed letter credit, not confirmed letter credit, revocable credit, not revocable credit. They have transferable credit, not transferable credit. So all of these kind of things have been defined by the UCP, the Uniform Custom Practice. So I will pick up this procedure. This will have been well documented. All the things are documented clearly because it exists here for many centuries. The documentary procedure came into practice by some 100 years ago, even 1,000 years ago. So it's a well-known procedure.
So it's never been changed or very, little changes have been
It's
made?
being challenged now because of the electronic media.
Yes.
But it was stable for 100 years.
Gradually
Gradually
I see.
developed. Gradually developed. It depends on the development of international commerce and technicals and so on. But now the big challenge is moving to electronic commerce. Usually they define based on the paper. This was designed at the time when paper document dominate the practice of business communication, and we call keep it.
Just as a brief clarification, the motivation of this is in the days of, 2 centuries ago, a shipment could take 2 months. And the guy selling it wants to get paid right away, and the guy buying it doesn't want to pay until it gets there. And so a bank comes in and holds the credit in between. So if they pay this guy, the bank now is holding the credit until it arrives. And the bank needs all kinds of security so they don't lose it. There's pirates and all kinds of things, and deceptions and so forth. So this is gradually, ships have sunk and all. They keep working out the details. The controls, over-control, under-control until they set this balance. So that this is called the documentary credit, because the bank doesn't look at the goods, they only look at documents. So in that sense, it's very nice computationally that it's only documents. And this so-called letter of credit is the thing that is the terms of that particular contract. And the bill of lading is the bank's evidence. It's kind of like a temporary title document. That's what and now sea transport has gotten faster, but it's still a couple weeks. And it's still enough that the documentary credit is still, and in between time, they may have transfers or something.
Yeah.
The beneficiary at the other end may change.
The reason is that the trader needs to liquidate their capital. They cannot wait until the goods arrive to sell it. So that when they get the bill of lading, they can immediately sell it if they get profit.
So just by itself, this is a worthwhile contribution. But in your dissertation, this is an example of an example domain, a challenging example domain for the larger.
Right, that is the kind of validation whether the formalism provides sufficient constructs to model the domain. Because the documentary credit is the complex one, the most complex one. If you can model this kind of procedure properly, you can model all the kind of procedure. And the second contribution, you can look here, return back to the control. here.